So we're going to talk about graphing quadratics. Now a quadratic graph is a parabola, and so the basics of that is you're going to have either a U, and it looks like a U and it goes up. It either goes up like this is called opened up, okay, or it's going to be going down like this, and this is called open down. Okay, so it's going to be one of the two. Some specific things about a parabola, which is what it's called, is that a parabola is cut in half and it's symmetric on both sides. So here you see I'm putting a dotted line in here on both of them. This is called the axis of symmetry. And this is an imaginary line. We don't actually see it. It's an imaginary line, and it cuts the parabola in half. So the idea is it's symmetric on both sides. This point right here is equidistant from the line as this point right here is, and we'll use that to our advantage when we're graphing. Another part of the graph that we're going to really care about is the point on the axis of symmetry on the parabola at the very bottom, or if you're here and it's open down, it'll be at the very top. This is called the vertex. Now the vertex is either the highest or the lowest point on a parabola, depending on if it's open up or open down. And so to be able to graph a parabola, we're going to first find these two things, the axis of symmetry and the vertex, and then from there we can graph the rest. So let's look at an example. Let's say we have y equals x squared plus 2x minus 3, and we're going to graph that. So I'm going to set up my xy axis, and the first thing I want to do, number one, what you want to do is you want to find your axis of symmetry. Now to find your axis of symmetry, you're going to find x equals negative b over 2a. Now as far as a, b, and c go, a is the number in front of x squared. It's not the x squared itself, but it's the number in front. Here it'll be a 1. B is the number in front of x, and c is the constant that doesn't have an x on it. Okay, so when I'm finding the axis of symmetry, I am going to be plugging in whatever b is, and here b is 2. Notice I have a negative out in front because that's what my formula has. And then I'll be plugging a, which is 1. So my formula simplifies to negative 2 over 2, which is negative 1. So my axis of symmetry is at negative 1. Now we move on to find the vertex, because the vertex is going to be on the axis of symmetry. Okay, so now when I find the vertex, I'm going to take that value I just got, that negative 1, because that's going to be the x value of my vertex. My vertex is going to be somewhere on this line, and this line is on the x value of negative 1. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that negative 1, and I'm going to plug it in for x on my equation. So let's do that. So my equation says y equals, I'm going to plug in negative 1 in a bubble and square that. The negative gets squared also. 2 times negative 1 minus 3, which gives me negative 1 squared is a positive 1, minus 2 minus 3 gives me negative 4. So my axis of symmetry, I get the y value of negative 4. So there's my vertex. Now every other point on here is going to be symmetric. So the step 3, I need to find 4 more points. Now, I say that because I want you to have 5 points and we already have a vertex. So you need to find 4 more points, but it's actually going to be easier than what you think. Now, let me move some of this out of the way a little bit. One thing I want you to do is I want you to set up a table. And on this table, you're going to put all your points. So far, we have negative 1 and negative 4. Now we're going to find other points. One of the things I suggest is plugging in 0, because 0 is really easy to plug in. So if I plug in 0, I get 0 squared plus 2 times 0 minus 3. I'm plugging into the original equation up here. So I'm plugging that in. I get 0, 0, and I get negative 3 as an answer. So if I was to plug in 0, I would get negative 3. So I find that on my axis, and I've got that point right there. Now this point, if I look at it, is 1 away from the axis. So that means I'm going to have its mirrored point 1 away on the other side. So I can make a point there, and I've got that point. And that point is negative 2, negative 3. So all of a sudden, I've kind of cheated almost. It feels like I'm cheating anyway, and gotten another point without having to plug it in. So then we can plug in another point. You don't want to plug in anything you already have. See, I already have -2, -1, and 0. Maybe I'm going to plug in 1. So then I get 1 squared plus 2 times 1 minus 3. That gives me 1 squared is 1 plus 2 minus 3. That'll give me 0. So then I put my point there at 0. I'm going to write that down that I plugged in 1 and I got 0. And now that is 1, 2 away, so I'm going to go 1, 2 away and put a point there. And so that's going to be my 5th point, which is at -3, 0. And there's my parabola. And now once I have 5 points, I can sketch it in, and I'm done.